Cadet Hansol stood at attention under the bright morning sun. His black boots shone like mirrors, and his blue cadet uniform had no wrinkles. Around him, 200 other human cadets formed perfect lines on the parade ground of Earth's Interstellar Military Academy. Today was different from their usual morning formation. 5 massive alien ships hung in the sky above them, their silver hulls gleaming. These were the ships of the Talgary, the most powerful warrior race in the known galaxy. "Stand straight, eyes forward," Captain Kim Sujai called out. She walked along the lines of cadets, her own uniform crisp and perfect. She stopped next to Hansol, speaking quietly. "Remember, no matter what they say, stay calm." Hansol gave a small nod. He had heard stories about the Talgary. They were tall, strong, and proud. They had the best weapons and armor in the galaxy, and they thought humans were weak. A bright light appeared in the center of the parade ground. When it faded, 12 Talgary warriors stood there. They wore powered armor that made them 3 meters tall. Their helmets had glowing blue visors, and strange weapons hung at their sides. The leader stepped forward. His armor was darker than the others, with red markings. He removed his helmet, revealing gray skin and 4 yellow eyes. "I am Commander Kex of the Talgary Defense Force," he said in perfect English. His voice was deep and loud. "We are here to evaluate your training methods." The way he said evaluate made it clear he didn't expect much. Hansol kept his face still, but his hands tightened into fists at his sides. Captain Sujai stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Welcome, Commander. We are honored by your visit. I am Captain Kim Suji, Training Director of the Academy." Commander Kex walked around the formation, looking at the cadets. He stopped in front of Hansol. "Your weapons are so basic," he said, looking at the rifle on Hansol's shoulder. "And your armor is practically nothing." He tapped Hansol's uniform with one armored finger. "We believe in training our soldiers to fight with and without technology," Captain Suji said calmly. "Technology can fail. The warrior cannot." This made Commander Kex laugh. The sound was like rocks falling down a hill. "Fail. Talgary technology never fails. And what good is a warrior without proper tools?" He turned to his warriors and spoke in his own language. They all laughed. Hansol felt his face grow hot, but he didn't move. He remembered what his instructors had taught him. Sometimes the best response is silence. "Perhaps you would like to see our training methods in action?" Captain Suji asked. Her voice was still calm, but Hansol could hear a hint of steel in it. "Yes," Commander Kex said with a smile that showed his sharp teeth. "Show us how you train your warriors. We will observe your methods, and then show you how real soldiers fight." Captain Suji nodded. "Very well. Cadet Hansol, front and center." Hansol stepped forward, his movements sharp and precise. He could feel the Talgary's 4 eyes studying him, looking for weakness. He stood straight and looked ahead. "This is one of our top cadets," Captain Suji said. "He and his team will demonstrate our training methods." Commander Kex made a sound like a snort. "This small one. Very well. It should be entertaining." He put his helmet back on and turned to his warriors. "Set up the combat simulators. Let's see what these humans can do." As the Talgary moved away to set up their equipment, Captain Suji spoke quietly to Hansol. "Remember your training. All of it. Even the old ways." Hansol nodded. He watched the aliens with their advanced technology and confident movements. They thought they knew everything about warfare, but Hansol knew something they didn't. Sometimes the oldest lessons were the most important ones. The real test was about to begin. The combat training hall was massive. Its walls could change to show different battlefields, and its floor could reshape itself to create different terrains. Hansol walked in with Captain Suji, looking at the Talgary's combat simulators. The alien machines floated in the air, glowing with strange lights. "First, we will test your cadets' basic combat skills," Commander Kex announced. He pressed some buttons on his arm panel. The room changed around them, becoming a rocky battlefield with destroyed buildings. "Choose your team, Captain." Captain Suji nodded and touched her communication device. "Cadets Jai-ho and Nae-young, report to the combat hall immediately." Within 2 minutes, 2 more cadets joined them. Ji-ho was tall and strong, known for his excellent hand-to-hand combat skills. Nae-young was shorter but moved like a shadow, the best at stealth in their class. They stood at attention next to Hansol. Commander Kex looked at them and shook his head. "Only 3? We usually train in groups of 10. He turned to his warriors. "Reduce power levels to 30%. We don't want to hurt them too badly." The Talgeri warriors laughed again. Hansol looked at his teammates. Jeho's face was red with anger, but Nae-young's expression stayed calm. They had trained together for 2 years. They knew each other's moves without speaking. "The rules are simple," Commander Kex said. "Your team against 3 of my warriors. The objective is to capture the central point." He pointed to a raised platform in the middle of the simulated battlefield. "You may use any weapons or tactics you wish." Captain Sujai stepped forward. "And what weapons will your warriors use?" "Standard training equipment," Kex replied. He held up a weapon that looked like a rifle made of light. "These will simulate battle damage without causing real harm. Your outdated weapons will be given the same effect by our systems." Hansol checked his rifle and made sure his combat knife was secure. Jiho stretched his muscles, and Nae-young adjusted her lightweight armor. "One more thing," Captain Suji said. "No flying. The combat must take place on the ground." Commander Kex's 4 eyes blinked in surprise. "Without flight? But that removes many advanced combat techniques." "Those are our terms," Captain Suji said firmly, "unless you think your warriors can't win without flying." The commander's gray face darkened. "Very well. No flight assists." He turned to his warriors and selected 3. "Show these cadets how real warriors fight." The 3 Talgeri warriors took positions on one side of the room. Their armor hummed with power, and their weapons glowed brightly. Hansol led his team to the other side. "Remember your training," Captain Suji said quietly. "All of it." Hansol nodded. He looked at his teammates and made a small hand signal. Both nodded back. The Talgeri might have better technology, but Hansol's team had something else. Months of training in silent communication and coordination. "Begin in 30 seconds, Commander Kex announced. The lights in the room dimmed, making the battlefield feel more real. "Try to last at least 1 minute. It would be embarrassing if..." Before he could finish, all the floating combat simulators suddenly sparked. The lights flickered. Captain Sujai looked up with concern. "Minor power fluctuation," one of the Talgeri warriors reported. "Backup systems engaging." The lights stabilized, but Hansol noticed something interesting. For a moment, the Talgeri had seemed uncertain when their technology wavered. He filed that information away for later. "Begin," Commander Kex shouted. The battle started, and Hansol gave his first silent command. As the Talgeri charged forward with their advanced weapons, his team moved like shadows through the ruins. They had trained for this moment, and they would show these aliens that humanity's ways of war were far from obsolete. The first battle was quick and painful for the human cadets. The Talgeri warriors moved with incredible speed in their powered armor. Their energy weapons fired with perfect accuracy. Within 2 minutes, Hansol's team was defeated. Again, Captain Sujai ordered as soon as the simulation ended. Her face showed no emotion, but her eyes watched everything carefully. The second battle lasted 3 minutes. This time, Hansol's team managed to hide longer. They used the broken buildings for cover and moved separately. But the Talgeri's advanced sensors found them easily. Their glowing weapons turned each hiding spot into a trap. "Your cadets hide well," Commander Kex said to Captain Suji, "but hiding is not fighting. Perhaps they should train to be spies instead of warriors." His warriors laughed at his joke. The third battle started like the others. The Tal'Geri charged forward, their armor making loud sounds on the rocky ground. But this time, Hansol noticed something different. When the aliens moved fast, their heavy armor made it hard for them to change direction quickly. During the fourth battle, Nayum discovered another weakness. The Tal'Geri always checked their wrist displays before making any moves. They relied on their technology to tell them what to do next. They're too dependent on their equipment, Nayum whispered to Hansol between battles. They don't trust their own eyes and ears. Hansol nodded. He had seen something else too. The Tal'Geri warriors talked to each other constantly through their helmet systems. They never used hand signals or other quiet ways to communicate. The fifth battle lasted 5 minutes. Hansol's team still lost, but they managed to wound one of the Tal'Geri warriors before being defeated. The alien was angry about being hit by such primitive weapons. "Your cadets are persistent," Commander Kex said to Captain Suji. "But persistence alone will not win wars. They need better technology, better weapons, better armor." Captain Suji watched as Hansol helped Jaiho up after their latest defeat. "Technology is a tool, Commander. It should serve the warrior, not control them." The Tal'Geri commander laughed. "Your ancient wisdom sounds nice, Captain. But the galaxy is not nice. Modern warfare needs modern weapons." As the day went on, Hansol's team lost 15 more battles. Each time, they learned something new about how the Tal'Geri fought. The aliens were strong, but they always followed the same patterns. They never changed their tactics. During the last battle of the day, something interesting happened. One of the Tal'Geri's combat simulators failed for a few seconds. The alien warrior froze, unsure what to do without his heads-up display working. Hansol's team almost reached the central platform before the system came back online. That evening, in the cadet barracks, Hansol sat with his teammates. They were tired and sore, but not defeated. "Did you see how lost they were when their systems glitched?" Jaiho asked, putting ice on his bruises. Nayum nodded. "They're like newborn babies without their technology. They don't trust their own instincts." Hansol looked out the window at the Tal'Geri ships floating above the academy. "Captain Suji wanted us to learn something today. That's why she let us fight so many battles." "Learn what?" Jaiho asked. "That we're no match for their technology." Hansol smiled slightly. "No, she wanted us to learn their weaknesses. Tomorrow, we train differently." As night fell over the academy, Captain Suji stood in her office, writing her daily report. On her screen was a message to all instructors: night training begins at midnight. Emphasis on silent combat and non-electronic communication. Attendance mandatory. The real training was about to begin. The night was dark and cold. In a special training room deep under the academy, Captain Suji stood before 30 selected cadets. Hansol, Jaiho, and Nayum were in the front row. No lights were on. No computers hummed. The room was completely silent. "Tonight, we learn the old ways," Captain Suji said softly. "The ways our ancestors used before electricity, before computers, before anyone dreamed of traveling between stars." She moved her hands in the darkness. The cadets watched carefully. Each movement meant something different. Advance. Stop. Enemy ahead. Safe to proceed. These were the hand signals warriors had used for thousands of years. "The Tal'Geri think we are weak because we keep these old traditions," she continued. "They are wrong. Our strength is not in having both old and new ways. Our strength is in knowing when to use each one." For 3 hours, the cadets practiced moving in complete darkness. They learned to feel the ground with their feet. They learned to hear the smallest sounds. Most importantly, they learned to communicate without making any noise at all. "Your helmet radios can break," Suji told them. "Your night vision can fail. But your hands will always be able to signal. Your eyes will always be able to see shape and shadow. Your ears will always be able to hear movement." Han Sol worked harder than ever before. His muscles ached from moving so carefully, so quietly. But each time he successfully crossed the room without making a sound, he felt stronger, different. Nei Young was the best at the silent movements. She taught the others how to roll their feet from heel to toe, making no sound even on metal floors. Jiho, strong as he was, learned to control his breathing so well that he could stand perfectly still for 20 minutes. The Tal'Geri rely on their armor to move quietly, Captain Suji explained. They rely on computers to see in darkness. They rely on radio to communicate. Take those away, and they become blind and deaf. Han Sol finished. He understood now why they were learning these skills. Each night, they trained in different scenarios. They practiced fighting in tight spaces where the Tal'Geri's large armor would be a problem. They learned to use simple tools to create distractions. Most importantly, they learned to work together without speaking. One hand signal from Han Sol could send his whole team into action. They moved like shadows, coordinated but separate. Each person knew exactly what the others would do, all without a word being spoken. The Tal'Geri warriors watched the human cadets during day training. They saw them using simple weapons and basic tactics. They laughed at the humans' apparent lack of progress. But they didn't know about the night training. The morning of the final exercise arrived with unusual activity in the sky. The sun looked brighter than normal, and strange lights danced in the upper atmosphere. The Academy scientists were concerned, but the Tal'Geri insisted the exercise should proceed as planned. Commander Keck stood in the control room, looking down at the massive combat arena. His warriors had spent all night setting up their most challenging battlefield simulation. The room was now filled with obstacles, trenches, and fortified positions. Holographic projectors created the illusion of a ruined city at night. "Your cadets will face our elite team today," he told Captain Suji. "We have programmed the most difficult combat scenarios from actual battles. Are you certain you want to proceed?" In the darkness of the combat arena, the Tal'Geri warriors struggled with their powerless armor. Each suit weighed hundreds of kilograms without its power systems. The aliens could barely move. Their advanced sensors were blind. Their communication systems were silent. The first warrior fell without making a sound. Nei Young had moved behind him like a ghost, using the techniques she had practiced for countless hours. She found the weak points in the alien's armor exactly as Captain Suji had taught them. 2 quick strikes, and the warrior was eliminated from the exercise. Contact lost with Squad 3. One of the Tal'Geri shouted into his dead radio. His voice echoed through the dark arena, giving away his position. He did not know that shouting his location was a deadly mistake. Jiho moved next. In the darkness, his strength had a new purpose. He knew how to use the Tal'Geri's heavy armor against them. When the second warrior tried to turn, Jiho was there. He used the alien's own weight to bring him down, just as they had practiced in night training. Commander Kex watched from the control room in disbelief. Without power, the room's monitors showed nothing. But he could hear what was happening below. The sounds of his elite warriors falling one by one to enemies they couldn't even see. "Stop the exercise," he ordered. His voice shook with anger and something else. "Fear. This is not a fair test." Captain Suji stood calmly beside him. "The exercise continues, Commander. After all, you wanted to see our training methods in action. Now you are." Han Sol led his team with hand signals through the darkness. They had memorized every signal, every movement. They could read each other's intentions without speaking a word. The Tal'Geri, trapped in their dark armor, never saw them coming. The third warrior tried to use his helmet's night vision. Without power, the advanced system was useless. But the warrior kept trying to activate it, forgetting the basic skill of using his own eyes. This mistake cost him the match as Han Sol's team surrounded him. "Impossible," Commander Kex whispered as he heard another of his warriors fall. "They are only cadets. They have no advanced technology, no powered armor, no tactical computers." "They have something better," Captain Suji replied. They have training that works with or without technology. Your warriors are helpless without their machines. Mine are not. The last two Talguri warriors tried to stand back to back, an ancient defensive position they had forgotten in their reliance on technology. But they moved too slowly in their heavy armor. Han Sol's team had already separated them using silent signals and coordinated movements. When the backup power finally came on, the scene in the arena told the whole story. 5 Talguri warriors lay on the ground, their advanced armor now nothing more than expensive metal shells. Han Sol's team stood in the center of the arena, their basic weapons still ready, their movements still silent. Commander Kex stared at the scene below, his 4 eyes wide with shock. All his pride in Talguri technology, all his belief in their superiority, lay shattered like his warrior's reputation on the arena floor. Perhaps, Captain Suji said quietly, it is time to discuss a joint training program, one that teaches both the old ways and the new. The day after the blackout, the Academy's main conference room was unusually quiet. Commander Kex sat at the table, his 4 eyes focused on the reports in front of him. The room's lights had been restored, but the Talguri leader seemed different now. The arrogance in his posture was gone. Your cadets, he said slowly, looking at Captain Suji. They trained for this kind of situation, didn't they? Captain Suji nodded. We train for all situations, Commander. Technology can fail. Warriors cannot afford to fail with it. Han Sol stood at attention near the wall with his teammates. Their uniforms were clean again, their stance perfect. But something had changed. The Talguri warriors in the room no longer looked at them with contempt. Instead, they watched the human cadets with careful, studying eyes. In 500 years of combat, Commander Kex continued, no one has defeated our elite warriors like this. Never. He stood up and walked to the window. The morning sun reflected off his gray skin. We became too dependent on our machines. We forgot the old lessons. Captain Suji watched him carefully. The old ways still have value, Commander. They work together with new technology. One is not better than the other. Both are tools for the warrior to use. Commander Kex turned to face Han Sol's team. Show me, he said. His voice was different now, respectful. Show me these hand signals you used. Show me how you move so quietly. Ne Young stepped forward first. She demonstrated the basic signals they had learned. Stop. Move. Enemy spotted. The Talguri warriors watched closely, their hands trying to copy her movements. Jai Ho showed them next how to walk silently, even in heavy armor. Roll your foot from heel to toe, he explained. Feel the ground before you put your weight down. The Talguri warriors practiced. At first, they were clumsy. Their movements were too rough, too mechanical. But slowly, they began to understand. They learned to trust their bodies instead of just their technology. Han Sol worked with them on team coordination without radio communication. He showed them how to read each other's movements, how to work together without speaking. The aliens were surprised by how effective these simple methods could be. We have made a mistake, Commander Kex announced later that day. He stood before the assembled cadets and his own warriors. We thought advanced technology made us superior warriors. We were wrong. A true warrior must master both old and new ways. Captain Suji smiled slightly. Then perhaps we can learn from each other, Commander. Your technology is impressive, but our traditional methods have value too. The commander nodded. I will recommend to my superiors that we establish a permanent exchange program. Talguri warriors will come here to learn your methods. In return, we will share our advanced combat systems. Han Sol watched as Talguri warriors and human cadets began training together in the afternoon sun. The aliens were awkward at first with the simple techniques, but they learned quickly. They had finally understood that true strength came from mastering all forms of combat, not just the most advanced ones. You have taught us an important lesson, Commander Kex said to Captain Suji. One we will not forget. 1 year had passed since the day of the blackout. The academy looked very different now. Tal'Gari training ships floated next to human buildings. Alien warriors trained alongside human cadets in the combat areas. The sound of quiet footsteps mixed with the hum of advanced technology. Han Solo walked through the training grounds, watching the newest class of students. He wore an instructor's uniform now, with a small pin that showed both human and Tal'Gari symbols. He had earned it by teaching the first mixed class of human and alien warriors. "Senior Instructor Han Solo," a voice called. He turned to see a young Tal'Gari cadet approaching. The alien moved quietly, his feet rolling from heel to toe just as Han Solo had taught them. "I have a question about the hand signals." Han Solo smiled. A year ago, no Tal'Gari would have asked a human about combat techniques. Now they came to him every day, eager to learn the old ways that their people had forgotten. In another training room, Naum taught stealth techniques to a mixed group. She showed them how to move through shadows, how to stay hidden without relying on technology. The Tal'Gari warriors, once so dependent on their powered armor, now learned to move silently in simple clothes. Jai-Ho worked in the advanced combat area. He helped warriors combine traditional fighting moves with their powered armor. "The armor should help your movement, not control it," he explained. "Trust your body first, then let the technology make you stronger." Captain Suji, now promoted to major, stood in her office looking at the latest training results. The combined human Tal'Gari program had produced warriors unlike any before. They could fight with the most advanced weapons, or with no weapons at all. They could coordinate through neural networks or hand signals. They were ready for anything. Commander Kex had changed too. He visited the academy often, watching the progress with pride. "We thought we were teaching humans," he told Major Suji. "Instead, we learned the most important lesson of all." "And what lesson was that, Commander?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "That true strength comes from balance," he said. "Balance between old and new, between technology and tradition, between power and wisdom." The academy had become famous throughout the galaxy. Other alien races sent their warriors to learn this new combined style of combat. Each group brought their own technology, their own methods, but all of them learned the importance of mastering the basics first. Han Solo sometimes thought about that night in the dark arena, when everything had changed. The Tal'Gari had laughed at human methods then. Now they understood that the quiet warriors were often the most dangerous. At the graduation ceremony for the first mixed class, human cadets and Tal'Gari warriors stood together. They wore different uniforms but shared the same proud stance. They could fight in bright light or total darkness. They could coordinate with advanced computers or simple hand signals. Remember, Han Solo told his students, technology can make you stronger, but it's your training that makes you a warrior. Never forget the old ways. They may save your life when everything else fails. As the sun set over the academy, the sound of quiet footsteps echoed through the halls. In the training rooms, warriors of different species practiced together, sharing their knowledge. The laughter of the Tal'Gari now was different, respectful, understanding. They had learned that true wisdom often came from the most unexpected places. The legacy of that one dark night would continue for generations to come.